Good morning, everyone. CountryFlyboy here, and today my full review of FS Economy. Okay, so I've signed several flights, signed up for several flights in FS Economy. I think we had several flights, but they're all to the same the same departure and destination airport, so we can actually combine all these flights into one. We got I think it's about 9 passengers we got to pick up in Jackson International and take them to Tampa. They're corporate executives, hooray. So, bunch of rich people we're going to be flying today. The lovely, nice folks here at Blue Line Aviation in Lake City have made the aircraft ready. I'm flying the default Kingair, and that's going to be one of my gripes in the review later, is I had a hard time finding the plane that I wanted to fly that was available with FS Economy, so... Yeah, we're flying the default Kingair, but I have modified the default Kingair with ISG gauges, as well as I've given it a APU, which functions as a GPU. That is a thing you can do. You can give any aircraft in Flight Sim X an APU. There is a CFG entry that you can add. I'll put it in the description if anyone's curious, but you just add that to the CFG, and it will add the APU. You don't need to do it if it's a jet. If it's a turbine aircraft that's not like a turboprop, if it's an actual jet like a 737, it will have an APU already. Any turbojet aircraft on FSX automatically gets an APU. But you have to add it to any airplanes you want. You can add it to any airplane, even a 172, so you can effectively function as a GPU. You'll need some sort of gauge to control it, or you can assign some key commands. So I've added those gauges, as well as you see an enhanced EFD and EHSI, as well as some different radios in this plane. We're flying a Canadian registration aircraft, so it's going to be a bit different. Weather is IFR here at Lake City. We're going to ferry the plane over to Lake City, and I'm going to check the fuel there, see if we actually need to add any fuel before we depart and head to Tampa. It's IFR across the state today. Tampa's actually its weather's actually improving a little bit, but it was IFR. I just checked it, and it's improved slightly. The ceilings have lifted a bit, but so yeah, we're looking at low cloud decks, ceilings at like very low. I think when I was moving the plane around, I lost visibility when I took the plane too high. So should be an interesting flight. I'll record some footage and talk over it, so without further ado, let's get this review started.
Alright, so to start this review of FS Economy, I think we should first say what FS Economy is. FS Economy is a service, it's a free service that you can sign up for, and I want to remind everyone it's completely free of charge, costs no money, anyone can do it, and it works no matter what simulator you're using. So you can use FSX, P3D, X-Plane, FS9, you name it. Don't quote me on the P3D thing. I'm pretty sure it supports P3D, though. I don't see why it wouldn't. So basically what it is you sign up for it, and you search for assignments that you want to do. Pretty much every airport, most local airports in my area, had some kind of assignment. Even the backwoods airports in the middle of nowhere had at least 2 or 3 assignments. And each assignment pays X number of dollars, and you rent an airplane from the system to fly this assignment, and you get the money, and you build up money. Eventually you can buy a plane, or you could start your own little virtual FBO or a small virtual airline, yada yada yada. It's centered around general aviation operations, so you're going to be flying things like the Cessna 172, the 208, so it's not airline centered, nor is it military centered. Although you do frequently go to the military bases as well as the international airports, you'll be flying the GA planes while everyone else is flying the big irons. So if you're like GA aviation, and I certainly do, that's probably my favorite form of flying is the general aviation one, then this is definitely something you might want to look into. Now overall, I'm going to go ahead and give the score. I can't really give FS Economy a good score though, because as I was using it, some small problems with it reared their ugly heads. If these small problems get fixed, it would be a great thing, but the very first thing I had an issue with was when I signed up for it. You have to sign up for 2 different things. So you go to the FS Economy website and you sign up for that. You give them your name, email address, yada, yada, yada. Your typical website sign-up stuff. Then you have to sign up for another website. So you get the FS Economy membership. They send you an email. You click the link, and so they know that's your email address. And then you get told you have to sign up for another one. What? And what made this one worse was you had to go sign up for that other one by posting on the forum. Say, hey, I want a new account on here. Please give me a new account. And it took about a day. I say a day. It was actually closer to 12 hours for my request to get answered by somebody. And I didn't get it to the next day. So there was a whole 12-hour gap there. I could have been flying stuff, and I wanted to be flying stuff, but couldn't because I had to wait on someone to approve my membership on a forum post. And when I requested my membership thing through that forum, I took the liberty of poking around through the forum a bit more and found that there were several requests from people that were made during the month of January that did not get answered. So, yeah, that's a big flaw right there. Is first of all, having to sign up for two things to use one thing is retarded. Second of all, having to sign up through a forum post is even worse. That was the first big major flaw. Once you get through the sign up, though, as a pain in the ass as it is, you almost never have to sign up into the other thing. I use the SimConnect client, which starts as a separate program on my computer, so it auto logs me into the website because it has a built-in web viewer on that client. So since it auto logs me in, all I have to do to select flights and stuff is just bring up the client. I almost never visit the website on my browser anymore. Another thing I've noticed is on your password manager may not work. My password manager does not work to save its life on this website. For some reason, it will not remember the password. I have to manually type in my password every single time. So that's another annoying thing. So those are two annoying things I wanted to get off the bat right away. So if those two things don't sound like they will appeal to you, then FS Economy is not going to be for you. So let's get on to the stuff I like about FS Economy. You fly with a purpose with FS Economy. So every flight you have a reason to do it, and there's a good reward. You're trying to build up money, maybe start your FBO or whatnot, or maybe you just like to have the flight generator. So yeah, that's a great thing, is flying with that purpose. It helps. It's like joining a virtual airline, but unlike joining a virtual airline where you're just flying cargo or passengers on a schedule and whatnot, there's no schedule in FS Economy. You just pick the flights you want to fly from whatever airport in whatever aircraft, and then you fly them whenever you want. Essentially, you have a time limit to complete them in, like a day or two. You have to do them within a day or two, usually it seems, but there's no actual schedule to follow. The second thing I like is that's GA-oriented, general aviation focused, and that is a big deal because everyone always focuses on the big airliners or military aviation, but the bread and butter, the bulk of aviation, especially in the U.S., is general aviation because there's only three types of flying in the U.S. There's military, scheduled airliner, and general aviation, and general aviation is everything. So yeah, if you order an overnight package, chances are it was on a GA flight at some point. And that is definitely something I like because with the VAs, you're almost always going into the bigger airports that occasionally you could get one that's a bit challenging, but for the most part, they're all the same. They're boring as hell. Or the military airplanes, there's fun in them, definitely, especially doing corkscrews or the fleet break. But there's a lot of precision in it, and you really have to practice to get good at the military aviation. So it's definitely not for everyone. But GA flying, anyone can really do, and you often end up going into these smaller backwoods airports that the ones you just fly over, say, huh, that's a neat little airport down there, when you're doing your airline flights. Those are the ones you're going into with FS Economy. So I really like that. GA-oriented is a good thing. And as I mentioned, you'll be going into the smaller airfields. There's another thing I like. The small airfields, the ones that have 50-foot obstacles and short runways. So no two flights are ever the same. It's really interesting. Now you feel like you're flying for real in a sense too, because since the planes are rented by actual people in the system and the fuel load carries over, you feel like you're flying a plane that someone just flew before you, in a sense, because you'll get the same fuel load. You start off with the fuel load that he ended with, unless you add fuel to it. So it's really nice. You feel like you're flying a plane that someone else just flew, especially if you're renting. If you own your own airplane with FS Economy, then obviously it's your plane, do whatever, unless you rent it out. And there are a few small VAs and charter-oriented VAs that use FS Economy, so I can only see this being really neat for them in the sense that they actually manage the company and the pilots fly the plane, they hand them off to one another. Now, there's a lot of good things about FS Economy, and I want to stress that the stuff that I had problems with is mostly small things. If these don't bother you, you probably won't have an issue with FS Economy, and I'm most likely going to keep using FS Economy too. But these were small problems that they're little nitpicky, but small problems can add up. And there was quite a few small problems I ran into with FS Economy. Now again, I want to stress I'm using the FSX on Windows 7, and I'm using the FS Client, or the FS Client SimConnect version, the SimConnect of the FS Economy client. There's 3 different versions. There's the one for X-Plane, there's one that uses FSUIPC, and there's one that uses SimConnect. I prefer to use SimConnect. I don't like using FSUIPC when I can help it, but yeah, so the SimConnect one's the one I'm using. And let's start off right off the bat. The first thing I noticed was some assignments were crazy. I remember there were 10 assignments to fly 1 passenger each assignment from Atlanta to Salt Lake City, and he was paying $900 for each assignment. Okay, first of all, there's like 10 flights a day between those airports on Delta Airlines, so anyone who needs to go to Salt Lake City can just book a flight with Delta. And $900, I don't know what the coach class would cost for the day of the flight, but I'm sure $900 will buy you an economy class ticket to Salt Lake City. And another thing, no one's going to fly Atlanta to Salt Lake City in a GA plane that's not a jet, because a 757 takes 4.5 hours to do that flight. And so the only planes that can make that in any reasonable amount of time is something like a Citation or the Learjet. And he was only paying $900 per assignment. I'm sorry, dude, but $900 ain't even worth them pushing the plane out the hangar. It's not a Learjet or a Citation. $900, they'll laugh at you for that. Walk onto an airport and say you want to rent a Citation for $900. They'll laugh you off the airport. So there can be some crazy assignments that pop up every now and then, especially at the bigger international airports. Now, one thing I would like to mention is you can combine assignments together. You can actually select all of those assignments. Say there were 10 assignments, 1 passenger each, going to between the same airport. So you can select all 10 of them, load 10 people on your next flight, and it registers it as 1 flight altogether. So you just took 10 people, and you get the combined total of each flight. So $900 times 10, that's a decent amount of money. So, yeah. So you might be able to justify flying that then. So there can be some crazy assignments. The biggest problem I had was the lack of aircraft availability and variety. The thing is, you have to rent the planes with the FS Economy system, and if there's no, if you have a particular plane you want to fly, see, when I recorded the footage for this video, I wanted to fly the Beech Kingair 350. There was none at Jackson International. Either the closest one was at Lake City, and I had to ferry that plane from Lake City to Jacksonville. Now, you eat the price of the ferry flight because you're not making any money for that flight, and this can be a problem, and I had it be a problem on some of my test flights. You just can't use the planes you want sometimes. If you have a particular plane you want to fly and there's not one in the system nearby, you're shit out of luck. And that I don't like, because that may be realistic, but there's a point when you're getting too realistic, and that's it. It's sometimes you want to fly a plane, so I just want to fly the Kingair 350. I don't want to fly the Cessna 206 or whatever aircraft's at the airport. Or nearby to ferry it. I want to fly the Kingair 350. And I can't because there's not one nearby. I have to ferry it an unreasonable distance. The main problem I had was finding one that was both rentable and in service, because sometimes they'll be down for maintenance and you can't fly them. In fact, the one I wanted to fly was actually at Tampa. I was going to ferry it from Tampa to Jackson and back to Tampa, but it was down for maintenance. And apparently the guy had crashed it on the last flight because it was down for maintenance. And his last flight in the plane, I looked at the logs, was in 2009. So I can assume that plane is out of the system. But since it's a player-owned aircraft, it's just sitting there in the hangar not doing anything, and it's not helping anybody. So, yeah, things like that, you just gotta look for that. The other is the, I had some client issues too. Sometimes the client will change the tail number of your plane, but not really. It doesn't visually change it on the paint job. Like, I'm talking the default plane where you can change the tail number and it changes on the paint job of the plane too. Obviously, that doesn't work with a textured tail number, but it doesn't change your ATC call sign. It just changes it on the number plate in the cockpit. So you can get really confused thinking that's your call sign, when in reality it's not. It's very annoying. The client will change your tail number, even if you didn't ask it to do it. The second you start to fly, it makes several changes to your plane. Now, I had a problem when I recorded the footage for this one. Even though I was in the default Kingair, it kept saying that I wasn't. So I had to switch paint jobs. I was using a third texture add-on. Not an add-on, but another texture. It wasn't a default texture for the Kingair. It was another one. And it kept registering me as not in the default Kingair. And it kept saying, hey, you can't fly this flight. You are not in the Kingair yet. But I was. And that really ticked me off. I had to switch to another plane, one that I didn't want to fly, and that's annoying. That's very annoying, and unfortunately FS Economy has to lose a decent amount of points for that, because it's annoying to not be able to fly the plane you want to fly. This is a simulator, not real life, so we should be able to fly the planes we want when we want to. Some other client issues is it changes your payload and changes your fuel load to match what it has in the system. Now, the fuel is not too terribly bad, although it does have some problems when it comes to add-on planes. I noticed in the A2A planes it wouldn't make these changes, so you had to manually set your payload in the A2A aircraft. But any aircraft using the default payload system will be affected by this. If it really, really is a problem if the airplane doesn't 100% match how it is in the system. For example, the Cessna 182 in FS Economy has 92 gallon of fuel, but the Cessna 182 for A2A is only 80 something, I believe. So inconsistencies like that can lead to problems. Another thing is it changes the payload, and it does it in a stupid way. It takes whatever your payload for the flight is supposed to be, divides your total number of payload stations to get an even number, and then puts the same number in each payload station to add up to the total payload for the flight, which is retarded. I can see that being useful for people who are lazy, but some of us, we can manage the payload ourselves. In fact, I noticed several times when I set the payload with the default payload manager in the default Kingair or a default plane that I was using, or the Coronado ones, I set it up the way I wanted, and it matched the payload in FS Economy fine, or maybe it was off by 1 or 2 pounds, but nothing big. The second I started the flight with FS Economy, it changed it, and I had to go back and redo that payload again, and it was really annoying. Or I have to rebalance the fuel tanks because it might put too much in one tank and not enough in the other, and I don't want to fly a lopsided plane. So, yeah, there's small issues. I can see where some people would like them, though. They just need to be toggleable. We need to be able to turn those features off because they're stupidly annoying for me. Unfortunately, there's no way to turn them off, so FS Economy, you're losing points for that one too. No way to turn off the payload and fuel update. Another thing I noticed, and this applies mostly to the website, but it happened on the client web browser too, you get auto-logged out after a certain number. If you have the client running and it is registering you as logged into the web page for a certain amount of time, and there's a timeout thing. If you are in the web browser, if you're on the website logged in for a certain amount of time, it auto-logs you out. Now that doesn't seem to apply for timeouts. It starts a timer, it seems. I don't get that, nor do I like it, because I kept having to log back into. There was one test flight I did where I did 5 flights in a day, and I had to log in 3 times to do all that. So, yeah. And another thing is there's not much variety in the payload or the flights you get. Now, what I mean by that is your cargo could be different, your passenger count could be different, but it uses 170 pounds per person like an airliner would, which is kind of silly because I wish it would just give you a random weight per passenger, or weight for each passenger between a range of numbers. Say like 130 to 200 would be a good range if it just randomly picks a weight between 130 and 200, so you can have different weights for each passenger. That would be nice, because GA flying, you can just ask the passengers how much they weigh. You don't have to use standard weights, and that leads to problems in that nobody ever flies with baggage apparently, because if you have 5 passengers each at 170 pounds and you load up each one passenger in each seat to get the 5 passengers, you'll notice that you can't add cargo because it's gonna register you as too heavy, and you're gonna be carrying more weight, burning more fuel for no reason, and have to not get paid for it. So I wish it would have different numbers for each passenger's weight instead of just using 170 across the board. Now, one way you can get around this is you can say, instead of carrying the 5 passengers, carry just 4 passengers, and the 170 pounds that would have been the 5th passenger, you can put that in your cargo bay, and that can be everyone's bags, but it's just annoying. And plus, then you have to redo the payload again because FS Economy changes it. Yeah, there are several problems. Now, I want to list some improvements I could recommend in case anyone who has any decision-making power at FS Economy is watching this. Some improvements I would like to see made. First of all, the options to turn off the payload, fuel, and call sign updates. I got really sick and tired of FS Economy client changing my shit every single flight I did. So if you're not in the A2A planes or any plane with its own payload manager, so like a default plane or Coronado aircraft, it got really annoying because every single time I flew, FS Economy changed my payload. And I noticed on my last flight when I recorded this footage, it changed it twice. After I was airborne, it switched the fuel tank amounts on me. It was crazy. I don't know why it did that. I only did that on that one flight though. So yeah, that's annoying. We really need the option to turn those off. If you gave us the option to turn those off, that wouldn't be a problem anymore. The second is, I mentioned before, you can't pick your own plane. So there may be times when we just want to fly a certain plane and we don't feel like doing a ferry flight from an airport 200 miles away. Or maybe the only plane available nearby is down for maintenance or whatever. Just let us fly our own plane. And I have an option for this. If you just say, I want to fly this plane, I don't want to rent one, then FS Economy can register it as a rented aircraft with the wet rent price and have the average rental price for that aircraft type across the system. Because the plane still needs to be in the system, so it would know what the average rental price of that plane would be. So if you take the average wet rent price for that plane and just charge us that amount if we choose to use a non-system aircraft, that would let us still simulate the renting process and all, but we could fly whatever aircraft we wanted. And that would be a big deal because we need to be able to fly whatever aircraft we want when we want it, because this is a simulator, not real life, and not being able to do that gets annoying. Another thing I want to bring up is I want to see more variety in the assignments. There's always just point A to point B flights. And payloads vary, passenger counts vary, But I would love. There's more to GA flying than just flying cargo and passengers. I would love it if there was local area flights. Say like 2 types of flight I would like to recommend added to the system would be local airfield flights where you just depart and arrive at the same field, but the goal of the flight is not to just take off and land and go to the destination. Since the destination is the same as your departure, your goal of the flight is to fly for X amount of time before coming back to land. So you could have, say, like somebody wants to go sightseeing or aerial photography or something. Maybe you could extend that and say, we need you to fly to this point and then come back. But flights like that. I would also like to see flights with departure and arrival windows. So, like, when you pick an assignment in FSE, you may notice it has a time till the assignment expires. It's usually a couple of days. Sometimes it's only a few hours, but I would like to see flights that had departure and arrival windows. Say like GA flights from a small airfield but to a large international airfield. ATC would like it if you came in during the non-peak periods at big international airports. So they often say, please arrive at this time. And you have to plan your flight around that. So that would be nice if they just had departure and arrival windows, not departure and arrival times. That would be a schedule, but windows would say we want you to depart this flight. We want to depart between this time and that time, or we want to arrive between this time and that time, and that would be good for the local area flights or for the chartered flights when executives want to go somewhere. So overall, I say FS Economy is definitely something fun, and if the problems I've mentioned won't be too much of an issue for you, I'd highly recommend looking into it. It's a lot of fun, especially if you like GA flying. And I would hope everybody does, because there's way much more variety with GA flying than airliners or military. Unfortunately, the score I have to give FS Economy is low. I'm going to have to give it a 3 out of 5. So on my scale of 0 to 5, 3 is the score it gets, which means it's okay, but you're definitely going to want to look into it. It may not be for you. And there's also better options out there. In the case, the better option would be just using your imagination and just doing it yourself. Like, just pick, okay, I want to fly I want to take Danica Patrick from Scottsdale to Daytona Beach for the Daytona 500. That'd be, just use your imagination, basically, instead of having a computer program tell you to do the flights. Unfortunately, that works out better than FS Economy for me, because then I can plan the flight myself, and I don't have to worry about something changing my thrilling payload. So yeah, that's I have to give it a 3. It's definitely fun, but it has problems. It's small problems, but they all add up, and the lack of options to customize it to the way we prefer to fly is one of the biggest problems it has. Because this is supposed to be a hobby, and you're supposed to have fun with it. You shouldn't. I don't think you should have to change your habits to suit something that is something like a service, especially if it's a payware add-on, which FS Economy is not. But you shouldn't have to change it to suit the add-on or the service. The service should suit you in a way. And I don't think I'm asking for too much. Just the option to turn that shit off, because it's not fun for everybody to have to do their payload 5 times over on one flight. Especially when you're forced to use some of that stuff. That just does not work out. I'd rather plan my own payloads. I keep coming back to the payload thing, because it was probably the most annoying thing aside from the sign-up part. So FS Economy, look into it if you wanted it. I gave it a 3 out of 5. So look into it. Maybe you'll like it, maybe you won't. If the problems I've mentioned are going to be an issue, you're most certainly not going to like it. Alright, so that was my review of FS Economy. Hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you next time.